Understanding transaction structure, key components and impact on overall transaction. Introduction to transaction structure. Transaction structure is the way a transaction is organized or arranged, which includes pricing, leverage, covenants, and security. Understanding transaction structure is important because it can affect the success of the overall transaction. What is transaction structure? Transaction structure refers to the way a transaction is organized or arranged, including the pricing, leverage, covenants, and security. The structure can vary depending on the type of transaction and the parties involved. Why is transaction structure important? Transaction structure plays a crucial role in the success of the overall transaction. A well-structured transaction can ensure that all parties involved are protected and that the transaction is completed in a timely and efficient manner. Pricing and leverage. Pricing and leverage are critical components of transactions structure that can significantly impact the profitability and risk of the transaction. Pricing refers to the cost of the transaction, while leverage refers to the use of borrowed funds to finance the transaction. Pricing. Pricing refers to the costs associated with a transaction, including fees, interest rates, and other costs. These costs affect the profitability and risk of the transaction. Leverage. Leverage is the use of borrowed funds to finance a transaction. It can affect the risk and profitability of the transaction, making it important to carefully consider the amount of leverage used. Covenants and security. Covenants are agreements between the parties involved in the transaction that outline the responsibilities and obligations of each party. They are designed to ensure that both parties fulfill their contractual obligations. Security. Security refers to the assets or collateral used to secure the transaction. It is designed to protect the interests of the lender or investor and ensure that the borrower or issuer fulfills their obligations. Covenants. Definition of covenants. Covenants are agreements between parties that outline the responsibilities and obligations of each party involved in a transaction. Financial reporting requirements. Covenants can include requirements for financial reporting, which ensures that the parties involved in the transaction are aware of the current financial status of the other party. Limitations on debt. Covenants can also include limitations on debt, which ensures that the debt levels of the parties involved in the transaction do not exceed a certain limit. Security. Assets for security. Security can include a variety of assets such as real estate, inventory, accounts receivable, and other assets. The value and type of asset can affect the risk and profitability of the transaction. Risk and profitability. Type and value of the security can affect the risk and profitability of the transaction. Understanding the collateral is crucial to the decision-making process regarding the transaction. Preparing term sheets. Summary of key terms. A term sheet is a summary of the key terms and conditions of a transaction, outlining the major points and serving as a guide for the parties involved. Importance of preparation. It is important to carefully prepare the term sheets to ensure that all parties involved understand the terms and conditions of the transaction and avoid potential misunderstandings or disputes. What is a term sheet? A term sheet is a summary of the key terms and conditions of a transaction, including pricing, leverage, covenants, and security. It serves as a guide for the parties involved in the transaction. Key components of a term sheet. Pricing. Pricing is one of the key components of a term sheet and refers to the price of the transaction. It is important to negotiate a fair price that reflects the value of the transaction. Leverage. Leverage refers to the amount of debt that is used to finance the transaction. It is important to carefully consider the amount of leverage and ensure that it is within acceptable limits. Covenants. Covenants are the conditions that must be met by the borrower or issuer in order to comply with the terms of a transaction. It is important to carefully consider the covenants and ensure that they are reasonable and achievable. Security. Security refers to the collateral or assets that are used to secure the transaction. It is important to ensure that the security is sufficient to cover the value of the transaction. Conclusion. Transaction structure is a key component of any transaction. Understanding the pricing, leverage, covenants, and security is essential for ensuring the success of the transaction. A well-prepared term sheet can also help to ensure that all parties understand the terms and conditions of the transaction. Thank you.